No risk, no reward. That is one of our themes today on Hitting with Holly. We're going to cover a lot of ground, and I'm going to kind of tie in that no risk, no reward theme throughout the show. But we're going to start to see. We're going to stay topical. We're going to stay in the moment. Obviously, we're more of a baseball, but you couldn't help but notice if anyone watched the opening. We're recording this Friday morning. The opening of the National Football League season on a Thursday night, and a game that didn't live up to the hype in terms of just great, exciting, because you had these two heavyweights in the Chiefs and the Ravens. But the finish is what we will talk about. And if you want to talk about a game of inches, and, Holly, obviously we saw it ended where the Ravens threw what seemed to be a potentially game tying touchdown with no time left. I honestly thought he had plenty of room in the end zone. My eyes are usually pretty good about picking because I'm used to seeing replay as a professional sports writer,
Sure.
but I didn't realize he was that close. But literally, the toe was what a toenail
Right.
basically determined the outcome of that game. And it's going to tie into my no risk, no reward topic. But Holly, I always laugh because people, you may not even remember it or know, I may not have told you this, but I covered in the NFL for 10 years back in my old newspaper days. I did that before I transitioned over to baseball.
Right.
And I always used to laugh that God always seemed to smile on the NFL. Like there could be bad weather everywhere, tornadoes, hurricanes, but it'd clear up on Sunday and NFL would get that game in. And then doing over 20 years on baseball, it's just the opposite. Baseball always is cursed. It always has weird stuff going on. Whatever could go wrong seems to go wrong. But I think last night smiled on the National Football League because we're all talking about it. It's the image of the toe on the back of the line is already making the rounds everywhere. And, just kind of your thoughts on that game and just the margin of error and the margin of victory being literally a toenail.
Well, let's just say this right off the top, that the NFL has done a fantastic job of creating that dynamic. However you choose, whatever conclusions you come to, or each, we all have opinions on this, but it does seem like just about every NFL game comes down to the last drive. I actually stepped out of the room that my son and I were watching the game in last night, and I knew that I needed to get back into the room because even at 5 minutes left in the fourth quarter, I knew the Ravens were going to have a chance to win this game at some point, or at least get the game tied, I guess is what I should say. But it looked like they were actually going to go for two. In fact, they went to the sidelines, and I think Harbaugh said that they were going to go for two. Yeah. So it was going to even give us even more drama. But, of course, we never got there because the toe was on the white line. It's so interesting when you live a life of a professional for as many years as I did, certainly as a broadcaster and as a player. You see a lot of things. I've lived a lot of things. I've been on a million different ball fields. And the first thing I thought of is how many ball fields I've been on where the lines were not perfectly straight. And of course, that's where this, my mind goes. If the line was just off a little bit, I mean, we could have had a completely different perspective. It could have been a different, it could have been a touchdown. Could definitely have been a different outcome. But I played on enough fields that have been beat up in older stadiums and older ballparks. In fact, when I was at Old Wrigley, I played at Wrigley in 04 and 05. And so it was before all the renovations, all the field resurfacing. And so, we used to tell stories of, Gale Sayers and running backs. And, they used to play football at Wrigley Field back in the day, 100 years ago. And so, we kind of looked at the field and it kind of played like a football field. And so there were bumps and there were curves and there were little hills and places that people didn't see and didn't even know. And, I was even telling you, the story about, there used to be this little bump down the left field line kind of towards the bullpens where the bullpens weren't out, underneath the stands. They were on the side of the field, kind of like you see in San Francisco and how it used to be there. So, right by that mound there, in fact, the infamous place where, the Bartman ball kind of happened, but just a little bit more forward, there used to be this mound, like I would run out when I was playing left field and I'd have to go up over this just tiny little berm and then run into the outfield. But even over that berm, the line, the fair line or foul line, whatever you want to call it, would run towards, obviously there. And of course, you could see the tilt in the line. I mean, it was just, you had to put a white line over the bump in the ground. And so it didn't, it wasn't always perfect. And I used to think, there might be a ball today that lands either just here or just there. And you're like, okay, well, wait a minute. That's actually, not straight. So I guess that's kind of what I was getting at. And of course, that's where my mind went with it. and exciting. I mean, that's the NFL truly has mastered the art of creating drama in the last 2 minutes of the game. So it is very good at it. In fact, we were talking about this a little bit last night, Joe. It's a lot of fun. It's sometimes what baseball does struggle with is that we play so many games. I mean, it's just that simple. There's so many baseball games. And of course, you don't get a playoff atmosphere. And you mentioned it right off the top. What does football possess? Like, why does it always seem like, they're always able to get the game in? Well, I'll tell you right now why everybody in Kansas City is trying to get the game in is because it's a national holiday. I mean, you've got one game, it's this week, and then you're going to have one game next week, and your whole season's going to be summed up by 16, 17 games. So, I mean, that's just how it works. Think about that in comparison to baseball, where you play a game every day. You know what? The weather, it looks like it might rain today. Maybe we'll play a doubleheader tomorrow.
Yeah. And this will get into the no risk, no reward. And you touched on it. John Harbaugh was holding up because I go touchdown. Everyone's seeing, there's a celebration, and you see he's holding up, going for 2, which we're all coaching along. I'm thinking, do you really want to go to overtime against Mahomes and run the risk of they get the ball now with this goofy kickoff thing where everyone, even the touchbacks to 30? So I think the field is shrinking, and it's going to make it a more explosive game for the offense. That I'm thinking, if I'm Harbaugh, I'm laying it on the line. I'm on the road. You got their defense winded a little bit. You got momentum, and just try to go for the win right there. And the fan in you wants to see that, but the just the weirdness, the imperfections, and now the technology of sports is when you're literally that close. But I think you'd probably agree. You're probably thinking like Harbaugh, just go for 2 and lay it right there. As an athlete, what do you think when you see that, if you're on offense and even on defense?
Oh, you love it. He was trying to capitalize on momentum a couple of different times. He went for it on 4th down one time a little bit earlier in the ball game, and they didn't make it. But it just shows the mindset of, how it works. You realize how hard it is to win in a place like Kansas City, where you're willing to go for it. I think about it in baseball terminology where, one of the first people I used to always think of who was so great at this was Tommy Lasorda. Tommy lived in the moment. Tommy wasn't about extra innings. So, I mean, he was going to do everything in his power to win the game in 9 innings. And it wasn't this mindset of, let's plan accordingly. Let's play matchups. Let's try to get everybody their perfect case scenario. He wasn't about that. I mean, I guess so everybody understands. I'll give you an example. He did it all the time. The guys would pinch hit lefty versus lefty, which is, you don't do that. It's unheard of. Like, you wouldn't see that in today's game, but he used to do it all the time because he wanted his best pinch hitter. And one of my good buddies growing up in baseball, Dave Hansen, who was fantastic, great pinch hitter, could do it. He was very good against lefties and very good against righties. And so, you would see Dave, Bobby Cox was known for it. I remember experiencing it a couple of times, and it actually shocked me. Bobby's like, you're pinch hitting against this guy because you've been swinging the bat pretty well. You're going to go up there and you're going to go pitch it. Like, he was in the moment, and that's managing the moment. And that's kind of what I saw last night. And of course, you generally do see and trust. Certainly, Harbaugh. It was so interesting last night. They were talking about both coaches for that team, and they're 2 of the best coaches in the sport. One's been, coaching his same team for 17 years. I think Andy Reid's been coaching forever, it seems, my entire life. Most people don't even remember him coaching the Eagles. So I do.
Even though he went to the Super Bowl one year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is these are guys who understand this game. What's so interesting to me, and I'll throw it back to you on this, is I'm so impressed that, like, you watch these coaching staffs and these players, because a lot of these players are young as well. I mean, they're young players, just like baseball players are young or rookies, and here they end up in this playoff atmosphere in these playoff games, and it's always so interesting to me to watch because they truly look as though they have become almost numb to the moment. There's never any panic in their looks or their eyes, and I saw that in both coaches last night, which I thought I was really, really impressed. This is game 1, and of course, I'm sure they feel it, but of course, the whole nation, the whole world who loves football is watching last night's game, and they're just calm, cool, and collected the entire time. So it was impressive to see both coaches. The teams looked a little rough around the edges, which is expected. I mean, remember, this is opening day, so.
Sure.
I kind of expected to see a little bit of that, but neither coach panicked. Neither one got upset even after the 5 misalignments on offense on the offensive line for the Baltimore Ravens, and of course those other things. But you didn't see him lose his cool, which is why these guys have been such steady, great Hall of Fame coaches throughout their careers.
Yeah, and that's tying into a number of themes. One is funny. Some of our high schools are playing right now. They're starting up their fall season, and they call it a fall league. I guess it's not officially high school sanctioned. So, but the various schools are doing stuff. And I happen to be up at Western High School, and they got really nice team coming back. And just I happen to mention it's one of their coaches as I was watching batting practice. I said, our good friend Todd Fitzgerald over at Stoneman Douglas won his 4th straight state title last year with Stoneman Douglas. I think he has 5 or 6 total at the school. Many national titles as well. And I noted, because I went to Fort Myers, I saw the state semis and the state finals for all of our local teams, including obviously Douglas. And Douglas was winning against Windermere, a really, really good Windermere team. And Douglas literally, Holly, was this close to losing. That Windermere stole momentum. It was 2-0 early for Douglas. Windermere went with this freshman pitcher, was ridiculously good. He kept him off balance. They couldn't really touch him. They got a couple of defensive miscues that went Windermere's way. They capitalized. They tied it at 2-2. And Douglas wins in 9 innings. Obviously, games are 7 innings in high school, so it was a couple extra innings. And basically, Douglas had to work out bases loaded jams and needed a walk-off hit with 2 outs and bases loaded in a 2-strike count in the ninth inning. They win. And I noticed this throughout, and I mentioned this to one of the Western coaches, is that the Douglas players and their coaching staff, and this is why Todd Fitzgerald's a Hall of Fame, basically high school Hall of Fame coach, they were there. They did not, and you would think a team that won that much, when they're getting really challenged, they might get a little ruffled, a little unnerved.
Right.
They held their composure. Their players had the ability to slow their heart rates. And why is that? I think a lot of it is they play a very tough schedule, and these kids play a lot. And obviously it goes back to Andy Reid and John Harbaugh have coached, and both have won Super Bowls at the highest level. They coached a lot. They're able to slow the game down. The moments are never too big. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you're going to win necessarily, but like you noted, we see at the high school level of the programs and the kids that are involved in so many high leverage, and that's why people go to Douglas. That's why the NFL is the NFL.
Well, it's a very good point. It's not one that's hard to understand. I've lived it. I've seen it myself. I've had great managers that I had the privilege of playing for throughout my career. But what I will say is this: it's learned. I mean, that's just truly what it is. It's we talk about how certain athletes perform, say in the postseason. Patrick Mahomes, we'll use him for an example, since he's an easy one to talk about. All of his postseason success. They were talking about in the pregame show last night about how this team, as it got towards the end of the year, started to really get it dialed in. They start to find it. These are roads that have been traveled, and that's kind of where this ultimately goes. It's the first time that you go through it that you're looking around, maybe a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, as to what's going on when you're in those moments. But when you're a player, who are you looking to? You're looking to your manager, you're looking to your coaches, you're looking to your head coach for security, for certainty, for understanding, for calm under pressure, for decision making, for everything in the world's going against us right now. How are we going to get it back? And that's got to be calm. Your teams play to the beat of their manager, to the beat of the drum of the manager, and that's really what it comes down to. And so, you talk about a program like Stoneman Douglas, which, to Todd's credit, he's been doing this for a while, and he's had a lot of success. And so now he's been down these roads. He's been in these situations before. And, much like riding a bike, we talk about that all the time, baseball, that kind of analogy of, this is what we do over and over and over again. We do it every day. It also applies to the intense moments, those extreme moments, the playoff games, the intense games, the everything seems to be riding on this pitch all game long conversation. When you've lived it, your heart rate naturally comes down. And when you've had success in it, you trust the success that you've had in those moments. And those are the moments that you pinpoint in your mind, that you go back to, as to why you had success at the highest level and why you had success in the biggest moments. You talk about the coaches last night and last night's game, and that calm is so obvious. They've both been there so many times, and that's really what it comes down to. But I will say, key ingredient for moms and dads and everybody who's listening, to us talk and the rant and rave about what we saw last night. You got to have good coaches. I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. And your kids are going to learn those situations through the eyes of their leaders. And when that happens, those players will develop that calm. It's not natural to walk into an intense situation and think, okay, well, I'm just going to right off the bat get it. No, we walk into that. I used to talk about this all the time. Like, my rookie season, what was your key to winning the National League Rookie of the Year? I said, well, I'll tell you, this is what I felt inside of me. For 156 games, which I think is how many games I played that year, was somewhere around there. Every game, because I was a rookie, every game was like a playoff game to me. I mean, getting to the field early was never a problem. I remember that year waking up at like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, like raring to go, like every day, where, my teammates who had been in the game for, 12, 13, 14 years, guys that I was playing with that were my teammates, were like, oh, we got a day game after a night game kind of thing, where I just had, just all this energy, all this excitement, but my focus was so intense and I was so locked into the moment because I was obviously trying to establish myself at the big league level, get my feet down. And that's kind of the journey that you generally go on. But speaking about that moving forward is, like I said, good coaches, good coaching staff. It's going to train your players to see the game with a calm and not a emotional reaction to every little thing that goes on in a game.
Well, I'm going to tie this into, I think it also goes to a, organizational franchise direction culture. And we are, and this is, people could say, oh, you've beaten up the Marlins, whatever, and analytics, you don't like analytics. Well, analytics is kind of a given. I think this is kind of a dumb argument for those who say, oh, you're not into analytics. It's part of the game. I would completely accept it. Is to the degree you want to measure it, because they bring in an analytic person to run the show doesn't mean, first of all, it's going to work, and secondly, that's the only way. But you have, as an organization, if you were a player on the Marlins this year, a veteran player who went into spring training coming off a playoff appearance last year, and you had a front office that just all of a sudden said, you know what, percentages said you really shouldn't have been there, so we're going to take any competitive spirit, we're going to take any, if the probability doesn't seem there, we're backing off and we're building for tomorrow. And then until we get the perfect, everything aligns up, and now we're going to go, like, magically in 3 years, every prospect's going to just be great. And I see all these people just grasping for anything Marlins related to be happy. This pitching prospect, Thomas White, who doesn't have a very clean delivery, but has had good numbers at, pitching, at high A. Oh, this guy is going to be in the big leagues next year. They just assume he's just going to come up and just be Randy Johnson right away, and it's all going to click. And then 25 or late 25 in September, we're going to go 20-10, and in 26 we're going to win the East. And it's the mindset of, as everyone, I'm from I think we've always been, as a country, competitive, want to be number one. It's like, whether I'm a sports writer and I'm doing this podcast, you being a player, you want to win. You want the opportunity to win. You don't want someone to put it, well, you know what? The degree of difficulty is too high. Don't go for it.
Yeah, well, that's an easy one for me. I mean, it's woven into our DNA. I'm a firm believer that's how God made us all. I mean, that's it. We want to win. We want to be great. We want to be better than I want to be better tomorrow than I was today. Like, that's the mindset that most athletes, that professional athletes in particular, possess. And that's the thing. It's always believing you can be better than your best, and that's really what it comes down to. And however you choose to view yourself in that moment, that there's always going to be something better. And maybe even you'll surprise yourself. You'll do things. And I did this a couple of times in my career, had a couple of games where you were like, wow, I didn't even know I was capable of doing that. And you'll surprise yourself. But to that point is self-motivation. And that's just it. You've got to push yourself. And I mean, that's just really what it comes down to. The key, you hear it from Michael Jordan to Patrick Mahomes to Aaron Judge. I mean, the tireless work and the determination that goes into, world-class athletes. Let's not lie to ourselves here. These are guys who are tremendously gifted, but they didn't just roll out of bed, and they didn't just fall on the football field. They didn't just land on the baseball field and find this success. There was a lot, tireless hours, late night hitting, practice, it's 6 o'clock in the morning, all the little things that you never hear about because, people don't always want all those details. They just want the glory. They want the glory story. They want to talk about the World Series. They want to talk about, the Kansas City Chiefs winning a Super Bowl again. Can they be the first team to win 3 consecutive? All these different things that our minds go to. We love the finished product, but we also need to understand that there's a journey that goes into all of this. I think of my son, Todd. He's going through it right now. And, but by most people's standards, his journey through college baseball has been, on the visual. Oh, well, okay, that makes sense. His freshman year, he didn't get a lot of playing time, so it's like a step back. But he couldn't be in a better place now from going from Division I baseball to a tremendous opportunity with a tremendous program up at St. John's than he is right now, and he couldn't be happier. And so, I know without a shadow of a doubt, my son Tug is going to have tremendous success this year. Based on just his mindset alone. That's where he's at, and that's where God's got him. And so he's good to go. And so I'm like, wow, this is going to be great. I'm excited to see it. But again, it's all part of the journey. I mean, this is a kid who's got the ability. He's got the skill set. He can do a lot of different things. And I know he's going to play baseball for a long time. But my point is that when I watch him, most people on the outside would say, what's the narrative right now? Well, okay, he's taking a step back. No, he's actually taking a huge step forward. You just don't understand the process.
Yeah, because everyone's clock, everyone's timing, everyone's situation, opportunity isn't always the same.
Right.
I have that with, with my children too. Well, my son, it worked out fast to get into pro ball like he's doing as a scout. My daughter is, in the fitness industry and, taking a different path, and sometimes doors aren't opening as quickly. So, it's like you have to sometimes wait your turn. You have to sometimes say, well, maybe this opportunity is, 2 steps away, but it doesn't mean, the determination to get there still has to be the same. And that's what it is, and we all get knocked down. I was 7 years not covering high school sports before I really even covered anything more. Then I got a backup Buccaneers. There's nobody coming out now. There's no journalism schools anymore, but back in the day, nobody now would do it. If they don't cover the Yankees, at 22 years old, they're failures. There's a culture, a society of kids that can't take no for an answer, and you tell them no, and then you're wrong. You're the boomer. You're the dinosaur. You're the this or whatever. And it's like, it doesn't work that way. These are only X amount of these jobs.
Well, and I'll add this real quickly to what you were just talking about. We've spoken on this dangerous trend that we continue to see in youth sports, which to me really breaks my heart. But that determination and that perseverance, there's different types of perseverance, and sometimes perseverance is through trial and tribulation. Speaking through it through my own baseball journey, I've had so much of it, it's ridiculous. But I also understood that I didn't get to be on a world championship team. I didn't get to be a 12-year major league veteran. I didn't get to win the National League Rookie of the Year award. I didn't get to do a lot of these things if I would not have persevered. I mean, I could say the exact same thing about my broadcasting career, even as much. It was a long, grinding journey, through opportunity, and one thing leads to another, and next thing you know, you got a door open for you. But you got to push, and you got to play hard. What we see in youth sports is this idea that my kid is something. He should not have to persevere through his team circumstances, and he's not the starting shortstop. So we're leaving. We're going to go to a new school. So we're just going to transfer. Yep. And really, all you do is just see this cycle of it happening over and over and over and over and over again for many of these kids. Very, very rarely do you actually hear the story of the kid saying, okay, well, I'm not starting, so I'm out of here. He goes to some new school and actually sticks there, and it actually turns out okay. Usually that kid ends up going to another school because the school he gets to, the same set of situations present themselves, and then they end up leaving and running again. So, I mean, I'm seeing it in high school football. I'm seeing it in high school baseball, which are the 2 sports I'm around the most, but I just see it every day. And so that idea of all right, I need to dig deep and find a way to be a better me so that I can beat this dude that just got here. You know what I mean? Like, this dude just transferred in. Yeah. He's getting ready to take my job. How am I going to be better? We talk about changing positions. When we were kids growing up, if you were the starting shortstop and a kid came to your school, you know, mom and dad moved into the neighborhood or whatever, and now he's on your team and this kid's really, really good, and we're going to move you over to third base. Well, okay, I'm going to be the best darn third baseman you've ever seen, and I'm going to fight, you know, through my performance to get my job back, so to speak, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. And we're already seeing it now on the high school football circuit down here in South Florida. At least 3 players have transferred out of situations they just transferred into. Right. A couple have went back to the original schools, and one left the state because either they lost playing time, they split playing time, they didn't flat out win the job. And I think in most of these cases, and you're okay, if you play at one program that's playing a lot of national ranked teams and that exposure, and you got D1 coaches in your backyard all the time because you got 5-star players on your roster, and then you go to a lesser program, you're not playing as good a competition, you're not getting, you know, so lesson to everyone. I'm not one to tell everyone how to live their life, but really think everything through the best you can. You know, listen to the advice you're getting from people. Make sure you really trust, respect that is where you really want to go. And then, you know, if you're a junior and you're bouncing back, you had a full other year. You know, just pay a lot more attention, I think, because I think everyone gets caught up now with NIL, even at the high school, and certainly NIL opportunities filtering down from colleges. Like, you go here, this NIL is just going to come following you up to the big schools you're going to sign with. You know, just pay attention and make wise decisions that are best for the student athlete and their family.
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. You know, like I said, to me, perseverance presents itself. And I mean, it's always part of every athlete's journey. And whether we're talking about kids who have high school careers, kids who go on to play Division I baseball, football, whatever, take it to the professional level, get it there. I mean, we all know that it's a cone. You know, as you get towards the top, it just starts to weed itself out. It only gets that much more intense. You know that there's talent at that level that's just like nothing any of us has ever seen. And it's, you know, the best players in the country at that time. But the point of the journey is understanding how to persevere. I tell the story all the time, which is a fun one. I'll give you another one. You know, I got drafted in 91 by the Los Angeles Dodgers. Obviously ended up going to instructional league that year, had an okay first year. But my point in the story is this, real simple. The following season, they drafted a kid named Michael Moore. He was coming out of UCLA. He was an incredibly gifted athlete. I mean, he was a wide receiver, played at UCLA. I believe he was an All-American. Could have done a lot of different things, but he was next year's me. Like, I mean, they took 2 of us, like one after the other. We were outfielders. Yep. I was a high school guy. He was a college guy. So he was already a couple of years older than me. And of course, you know, the minute I meet Michael, and he's a great guy, you know, meet him, and, you know, we kind of hit it off. And of course, you know, I'm 18 years old. We're in instructional league. This is 365 days later following draft. So now 1992, we're in instructional league together again. And I'm like, man, how am I going to beat this dude to the big leagues? Like, how am I going to how do I make myself Tommy's answer over Michael? I mean, that's kind of how it works. You just got to recognize it for what it is. And I remember telling myself, I'm like, all right, well, you know, we're supposed to be here at 7:00 every day. And I see Michael, he gets here about 6:30 every day. I'm talking about the morning time. That's how instructional league works. Usually because it's so hot. So in Arizona, you know, you get on the field pretty early and you get your work in and you go from there. I was like, all right, here's what I'm going to do. If he's getting here at 6:30, I got to be here at 6:15. Like, that's how you have to kind of see the world. But it wasn't like, okay, well, I'm going to leave. I've got all these other choices. Oh, okay, well, you drafted another guy, another outfielder, and you know, so that's it. My gig's up. I had to figure out ways to be more presentable. And and I remember getting to the end of instructional league, and Reggie Smith said to me, man, you know, I'm real impressed. You know, this was your second spring, your second instructional league. And he said, you know, most guys who come here in their second instructional league, and Reggie Smith was our minor league coordinator at the time. He came up to me at the end of it. He said, I'm really impressed with you. This is your second year down here. And, you know, I noticed that you were the first guy in the clubhouse every day. See what I'm saying? It's like, all I did was devise a way to try to beat my competition. But by putting myself in that position and saying to myself, okay, I'm going to be the first guy there, it opened up eyes. It wasn't how I could hit a fastball. It wasn't, my drop step good enough? It wasn't all the stuff that we talk about on the field. It was simply putting myself in a better position for the people who were in authority to see that my level of effort, my level of dedication was going to be over the top. What were my motives? Well, to beat the dude next to me. That was my motive.
Yeah.
It wasn't to send this message to all these people, but that's actually how the message was received. And so that's kind of my point here. I mean, we have to find ways, kids, to go out there and say, we're going to be better than our circumstances, and we're going to find our way through it. It can't always just be like, okay, well, I don't like where I'm at, I'm going to leave. Because every time you choose to do that, you're just basically starting over at the next place anyway. You're re-identifying yourself with everybody. And as soon as something doesn't go your way, you're going to feel that exact same thing hit you again. I don't like what I'm feeling right now. Is it time for me to leave again?
Yeah, and that ties into the no risk, no reward. You took the risk. You were like, okay, I gotta risk something. I could show up at 7. I could show up at 6:45. I could be 15 minutes behind him. And then I just will bank on the field. I'll just completely separate myself in ability. But you took the risk. You self-motivated and did what you needed to do to become what you needed to do. And we can't lose that and you know what? And a lot of our kids don't. In fairness, they're highly competitive. They're kids that have as much drive as ever. They're kids that work super hard. And but when we're talking about on these shows, the bigger issue, this is what we're getting at. Holly, you touched on something earlier, and I didn't necessarily think I was going to. I talked about this on my audio podcast on my Man on Second on Real Voices of the Game. And it was about Mike Norvell, the Florida State football coach. And it ties into what you said about players taking on the personality or taking the direction from their coaches. Mm-hmm. And again, we have a lot of kids from down here that go to Florida State. I have nothing against Florida State. I hope, the kids that sign there are great. And I don't really pay too deep a dive. I'm an Alabama guy. I don't really get too deep dive into Mike Norvell, except for he was up allegedly for the Alabama job. And I follow it back to last year when FSU went undefeated and did not get into the college football playoffs. And you expect, people to be upset. That's just the nature of it. Fan bases, colleges, and you expect a coach to make a statement. And then, normally the coaches, they make their statement. The university, they let others make their statements. They can show their displeasure. But Norvell went on and on. He was way over the top, insulting Alabama like undeserving, even though they beat Georgia. And the SEC champ really is never has to apologize for much because, the track record is a track record. And you were out with your quarterback. You weren't really the same team. And it just went on and on and on. So what happened? All their kids opted out of the bowl game. They played Georgia, I think, in the Orange Bowl and lose by 60. 63-3. Kirby Smart on the flip side, he had as much of a beef. They were 2 times defending national champs, undefeated, going to the SEC title game against the Nick Saban's, last season team. No shame losing to Bama in a close game. They get snubbed. They go from 1 to 5 or 6. They're out of the picture. They had no opportunity to. Many one-loss teams, have gotten in, obviously, through the years. Multiple years, 2 teams from the same conference are in the Final Four as well. Kirby Smart made his one obligatory, I think we were deserving, and kind of kept his mouth shut and just moved on. Well, fast forwarded to this year, Florida State, then I think FSU sued the ACC to try to get out of it after that in the offseason. They kept, getting all upset. They go open a year, Norvell, they go through the transfer portal, which did better for them, their recruiting. They go to Ireland, play a Georgia Tech team. They're a 10-point plus favorite, lose that game, come home, play at home against a 2-score underdog in Boston College, lose that game. And Norvell's quotes are all, I'm really sorry. We're not prepared as well as we should. We're really talented. And there's a lot of people I follow that are good college football people. They're apologizing for Mike Norvell. And maybe he's the greatest coach in the world. Maybe I'm missing something. But every time I see this guy open his mouth, he's whining about something. And consequently, his team's not performing. So, your thoughts there, am I being a little too harsh on Mike Norvell, or does this guy need to kind of shut up and get his team ready to play?
I'll say this because I thought it was very interesting that you tied it into Kirby Smart, because I ran across some great quotes from him, which I appreciate more than life itself when you hear them from somebody who's got such a high stature in college football and is, at least in my personal opinion, such a well-respected man and coach. The simple answer, and this is one of those subjects I know I could ramble on for probably about a half an hour, and so I'm gonna try to condense it as quickly and as simply as possible and make it real simple for people. I look at this situation and think you got two things going at play here. You have one coach who is more concerned with character, integrity, and playability, if you want to call it that. Just how his team's going to perform on the field every week, and then he lets the winning take care of itself. Tommy Lasorda used to say that to us all the time. Prepare, get ready, let the winning take care of itself. And what that statement means is, yes, we want to win. Yes, we are in some ways obsessed with it, but it's not our driving force. Our driving force is the process. Our driving force is the team. Our driving force is who we represent. Our families, our all of these things that factor into who we are as individuals and as a team. Kirby made that statement, I think it was about a week ago, in regards to how he coaches his team. And he goes, to be perfectly honest with you, we don't talk about must wins. That word doesn't come out of my mouth. Where we're going, what we're doing. Yes, we've got goals that are in play, but they're broad. Because my objective is to make my team the best team that it can be and let the winning take care of itself. On the flip side of this conversation, we've now welcomed in circumstance, unfairness, or we're justified some level of wrong that has come our way. And we've now changed the focus from being the best form of ourselves to complaining about our circumstances. Now, again, I don't want to say it like I know what's going on in these situations, because I'm not there. I'm not in that room. I don't know anything about how those conversations go down. But in all of the ways that we talk about winning and the way good coaches talk about winning, all of the things I just laid out, Kirby Smart, those things that he talks about consistently, there is an opposite to all of that. And I say that there's a key to winning. Well, there's also a key to losing. And when you're not prepared, when, if you're not in shape, if you're not ready, if your mind's not in there, we could go down an entire list of things that also work against you. But that's what good coaches are focused on. They're focused on the things that are going to make us play well. How many times have we said to ourselves, all right, well, it's real unfortunate that team played and lost that game, but you know what? They played a heck of a game. See what I'm saying? And that's where we're getting. It's what we're trying to dive into in this conversation really is, how are you losing? And that is what fans typically don't miss. And that's the thing where you're like, okay, most fans, they know when they watch their team, there are sometimes losses that happen. Maybe there's a play that didn't go your way, but our team played well. Things went right. We were who we were supposed to be. But when you lose in a way that people start to identify other factors that are now seem like they're hitting the team or have somehow has infiltrated the locker room or the clubhouse, that's typically what sends fans off. You see it all the time in baseball, because baseball doesn't lie and you play so much. And you can tell the healthy teams at the end of every year, because they're so obvious, because the healthy teams, they haven't always just been focused on winning. They've been focused on being the best version of themselves. And when you're not the best version of yourself and you're losing, it gets everybody's attention as well.
Yeah. Well said. And again, all our kids down here to go to Florida State, good for you and best of luck there. But it's just something I'm pointing it out, calling it straight. If I see if a coach seems more distracted, that kind of becomes your mindset. Well, and the thing I like about some of our kids here,
this is where that message would, he's got a real opportunity. Florida State's got a real opportunity to prove their worth by turning their season around. See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And when you go to practice every day, every guy on your team, he should be, as I said, showing up at 6:15. You know what I mean? Like, that's the mindset. And if you get that mindset, you can absolutely become the team that you still want to be. Yeah, you had a couple of bad losses, but how many times have we seen this where there's some things that happen at the beginning of the year where a team can say, okay, the season is lost. We traded away this guy in May. Stuff that happens that sends messages to your clubhouse that you can say to yourself, okay, well, we're still going to be the best version of ourselves, or we just pack it up and quit.
Well, the thing is now I almost wonder if with a 12-team playoff, there's almost the assumption, teams could lose 2 games and get in. That and early in the years when we get usually the USC against an LSU or something like that as the kickoff classic type of things. And so, obviously when you get heavyweights against heavyweights, there's going to be a loser. But I'm wondering if they're almost builds in, because college football has always kind of been go undefeated. Yes, we know most teams that win it all have had one loss, but the mindset still isn't, well, when's I going to pick my one loss? I'm going to pick it this week or whatever. Because you may have the Michigans run the table like a year ago and Georgia's and Alabama's running the table in the previous years. But it's like, do you almost sense that creates what we do is we won a 12. I mean, there are 11 really crappy teams out there. We could easily, be in this mix. I just hope it isn't, but just your thoughts.
Well, yeah. I mean, it really just kind of, you have to have hope. You have to have hope as an individual. You have to have hope and faith and belief and trust in everything that you're doing. In September baseball games that don't matter for a team that's on its way to 100 losses, on teams that have been knocked out of the playoffs. All of that stuff absolutely matters. Football, that message can get delivered quicker because, obviously you're playing a much shorter season and each game is essentially a playoff game. So, a couple of losses early in a year can absolutely set you back. But again, to the idea and the understanding that your fan base is going to say, listen, we want to win a national championship every year. I get it, man. Everybody wants to win the World Series every year, but guess what? One team's going to do it.
Sure.
And that means, in baseball, 29 other teams are not going to win the World Series this year. Only one will. There will only be one national championship. If you're going to live with that idea that if we don't win, then it's a complete failure, well, then you're never going to win. I mean, I played 12 years. I got to win one World Series, and I consider myself very blessed and very privileged to have won one World Series. So you kind of see my point. It's like part of this conversation is also that perseverance conversation. There can still be more extracted from a season and from a team in terms of growth of your youth, growth of your team, growth of who you are, growth of your identity. I mean, having been on a number of losers at the major league level, teams that were playing games in September, our mindset was, let's start playing right now how we plan on playing in April. We want to get this fixed. We want to get it right. Let's get healthy. Let's get, all of the answers that we all come up with. But all those are all conversations that you've got to have and that you've got to push through. I remember when I left Los Angeles Dodgers, I got traded to the Colorado Rockies. And the Rockies were on the cusp of kind of like making a move. I just got there and I had the sense and the feel. And, we had Larry Walker and Todd Helton. And, we had, Jeffrey Cirillo was swinging the bat well. This was in 2000. I got traded over. And Buddy Bell was running the team at the time. And Buddy was a great manager who just, to this day, I still think of what a good manager he was. And I just felt like, man, I wish somebody would have just given him a team that probably had a little bit more to it. And he probably would still be managing. But to me, one of the best that I ever played for, and I didn't play for him for very long. But with that being said, I just remember getting there and Buddy's message to me individually and collectively to this group as we played out the year, because we weren't going to the playoffs, was we're winning 82 games. So you know what I'm talking about. We are going to have a winning season. I mean, every game in September had so much motivation for us And we were playing games, and we had a couple of games in the snow, in late September snow in Colorado. I mean, but we were grinding. He was managing every game like it was a playoff game. And I remember feeling what I felt when the season started back in Los Angeles in April 1st. Like, hey, listen, we got to go to the World Series this year. Like that was the mindset. That was the mindset that he was doing a fantastic job of maintaining, even in those games that didn't mean so much in September to anybody else in baseball. They meant more to us. And that's, again, that message that has to be delivered. It's got to be that way. Coaches you got to believe in your heart that there's winning defines what you build. It's not the other way around. You can't just say, go give me the winning. Go give me the winning. I'm not going to, just give me the players, give me the, and I'm going to go get you got to oil it up. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got to put some, elbow grease into it, so to speak. You're going to have to grind. You're going to have to work things out. And good managers, good coaches figure all that stuff out.
Excellent point. In our final segment here, before we get out of here, and we got roughly 10 or so minutes, it gets to, I sent you this stat that Joe Shad of the Palm Beach Post covers the Dolphins tweeted out yesterday. He noted that 26 of the 53 players who are making the Miami Dolphins opening day roster were either sixth or seventh rounders or undrafted players, meaning obviously the last couple of rounds in the NFL draft, or, obviously went undrafted. And he didn't really add much context to that, if that's any league thing, but it is a salary cap league, so I think it's kind of safe to assume money's going to Tua, it's going to Tyreek Hill,
Right.
it's going. So the lion's share of the salary cap's going to the significant playmakers and franchise caliber players, and the rest, good luck, to put a roster together. So just kind of your thoughts on that. Are we basically kind of the structure, because all leagues and teams are going to adapt to the rules they're given? That's even our favorite Miami Marlins team. They're okay. If you could do analytics, we will go with a cheap payroll and try to get players outperforming. Just kind of your thoughts on where you think roster building is.
It's an interesting conversation, because first of all, we first have to identify that Major League Baseball and the NFL play by completely different rules when it comes to salary. So we need to understand that right off the top. But it also does speak to something that I mentioned to you yesterday, which really is everything that we've spoken about this morning. 90% of your team generally, 85 to 90% of your team generally falls into that pool. I used to speak about it in terms of agents. Let me ask you a question. Does Aaron Judge really need an agent? Think about it.
No, other than,
right.
No,
himself, right? It's so obvious. Does Juan Soto need an agent? You know what I mean? Like pick the 20 best players in Major League Baseball, and teams are going to line up for their services, whether they're being represented or not.
Yeah.
What it shows you is, because I've heard this from a number of agents and people that I've known throughout my life and throughout my career, the guys that they have to work for are the guys in the middle, the young guys, and then the guys in the middle, which are the guys who are good players, but have had ups and downs. And of course, I fell into that very easily, fell into that middle class. And, needed my agent to do a good job, every year that I was available for free agency, or, was looking for a deal, or whatever the case may be. But that also goes into coaching, and it shows you exactly how this works. What guy on the field needs the least amount of tension? And of course, let me be fair here, because again, football and baseball are two different dynamics. Football is different. So coaching, I'm kind of skipping this out. I'm just pushing to this aside and kind of honing in on Major League Baseball, but for a second, because this is, I've lived it and I've seen how it works. Who are the guys on your team that need the least amount of attention when it comes to the performance on the field?
Yeah, your stars. You would hope.
Your star players, right? Because we say it all the time. They don't really need to be managed. They know what they're doing. Their names are in the lineup every day. They're going to go out and perform. There's going to be good days and bad days. Their contracts are protecting them. But generally speaking, their track record speaks for itself. Who are you managing? You're managing the rest of the team. Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. You see what I'm saying? You're managing the body. And so what this has truly become is a discussion on how coaches, good coaching staffs, good ones, get away with. Like, the first thing that I thought of when you reached out and mentioned that to me was the Rays. Like, it's finding creative ways to compete. How are we going to compete? We cannot spend $300 million on a player. Can't do it. We do not have those resources. So how do we compete? Okay, well, we're going to do a heck of a job putting together a good manager, good coaching staff, good formula, and we are going to work this and make less more. Good ball players or fringe ball players, better ball players. It does work. I mean, I've been in enough places in my own career as a player to identify that certain places made me a better player. Other places, I felt like, I'm kind of like walking around on my, just on my own. And it was like every man for himself. And of course, that was an unhealthy place, unhealthy environment. But the other place where you're like, okay, we're all pulling in the same direction and we're building towards something, it makes your players, who are the body of your team, the middle, the guys who have to be coached, the guys who have to be taught a little bit more, the guys who have to be represented by their agents a little bit more, and who are going to pay their agents less than the superstar. That's why every guy wants a superstar. Why? It's easy money. It's, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to work at it. I mean, it's not so complicated. The player plays himself. I mean, if I were Shohei Ohtani's agent right now, you'd be like, okay, this is just, I mean, goodness, I go to anybody who would want to market him. There's a deal waiting for you. See what I'm saying? You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like, okay, but then you take, your utility infielder and you say, okay, well, that's a completely different story. But that's kind of my point. And that's how this journey works. The good coaches, the good coaching staffs, the good managers in baseball surround themselves with guys who want to make their teams better under all circumstances. They don't look in the mirror and say, dang, we've lost 7 in a row. They say, guess what? We're starting a winning streak today. I mean, it's all those little messages that can be delivered through time and effort, through love, through integrity, through character, all the things that that I've always raved about my whole life that make people better people and players better players.
Do you think it's hard to say it won't, but does it kind of water down the product? Does it make the product, we're going to see less of that dynasty, the 49ers of the 80s, the Montana years, or the Steelers of the 70s? Are we going to see that superpower again? Or it's kind of hard for me to say that because we've seen stacked teams that fall flat in their face because too many of the superstars don't mesh together and it doesn't necessarily click too. So what do you think we're seeing?
I think that you're probably right. And I certainly have heard enough guys who have way more experience and way more knowledge than I do on the NFL as former players speak on it and their concern for what's going on in the NFL. So you definitely feel it. Is it moving in that direction? Well, as quickly as I would say that, well, I'm going to agree with them and I'm going to take their opinion over my own. What I do see, I watched last night. I mean, it's the way that I've always seen the Baltimore Ravens. I've always seen the Baltimore Ravens as a team that seems like they're always making more out of less. A lot of times I used to, I knew that the New England Patriots had Tom Brady, but most people around the world didn't know the rest of that roster, most days. Yep. You see what I'm saying? And so, I mean, to really put it all in the same way and say, okay, well, this is the trend. This is what's going on. I think it always has been going that way. Really, it just gets down to how do you assess your coaching staff? How do you assess your manager? How do you assess your head coach in the process and the effort that they're going to put behind getting their players better? Again, I can't speak to NFL players, but I can certainly speak to major league players and major league players even in today's game. I'm still around enough of them, and I see enough of them even here in South Florida, just walking the streets. Guys with opportunity, they maintain the same level of passion for greatness. The question is, how are they being taught to achieve it? And that's the hard question that we have to ask ourselves here. And are we getting to a point where, change is happening so much all around us, not just with our major league teams, but with our coaching staffs, that there's no consistency. And when there's no consistency, winning very rarely follows. I mean, you're going to have to invest in at least a process and try to establish that process to see where it leads you to and see if there's, then you tweak it along the way. But, the whole idea in Major League Baseball of just, all right, it's not working, blow it up. Like we just hear it all the time. And it's, it seems like it happens everywhere other than about 8 places with the payoff never really seeming like it ever comes back around.
Yeah, and it's strange because they added the extra wild card to essentially alleviate that. And this is pretty much the root of my frustration with the Marlins is they went to the playoffs, but now all of a sudden the few that defend lose 100 instead of try to win 85 to get in. That it's just swept under the
Right.
rug. Now, it's like if you're not going for it the year after you went to the playoffs, you didn't wait to see this team fail. You just blew it up without, and you could say, oh well, you didn't add anything, so you essentially have blown it up because you didn't roll the dice at all this year. But then you have I had one guy tell me there are plenty of mediocre teams in baseball. Like the Marlins are bottom three. Their run differential is horrendous. Their record is horrendous, and they're acting like they're the same situation as the Cubs or the Giants, just right there, just tinkering with 500. And you guys are way behind the Giants. You're way behind the Cubs. You're way behind the Nationals right now, and somehow it's accepted. Now we know it's not. These are just a few that are buying in or just want to, they don't really know the sport at any real level. They think they do, but it just can't be. It shouldn't be tolerated, and like you say, baseball has these tanking teams when they created a playoff format to discourage that.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were a fan, let's just pick a team. Let's say the Houston Astros. You're a fan of the Houston Astros, so you know your team inside and out, but you don't know. You know the other teams of baseball. You're a baseball fan, but maybe you're not a diehard. You know very little about the Nationals, and you know very little about the Marlins, other than maybe when you would play them. You look at the direction that the Nationals have gone in, and the consistency. Even with all the rumors about the team being sold and everything else that's been going on and everything else that's been around them, and then you look at the product that you're putting on the field, and you look at the talent that's there, there is a level of optimism that's already there. It's like you feel like, okay, they're not one of the better teams in baseball yet, but they're definitely steps ahead of the Marlins. And you see my point is, like, if I were to ask a Houston fan, well, the first thing that you'd say, okay, well, there's been consistency there. There's consistency in their front office, generally speaking. There's consistency at the top step of the dugout as well. I mean, through the good and through the bad, there's this. It may not be the ultimate answer as this team progresses. They may make changes, but the way that they do things has been established. And I think that even fans of other places identify those things, and they say, okay, man, listen, this is a team that's up and coming, and okay, we can understand that they went through some down years. Those years hurt. We managed our way through them, but we're now seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Where I think that you look at a fan. I'll use Skip, for the Marlins. I mean, Skip Schumacher, from somebody like I said, using a Houston Astro fan, right? In the span of 365 days, is going to go from the National League Manager of the Year to a team that's losing 100 games.
Yeah.
So you're going to tell me that fan, like, on the surface, you say, well, what happened? He was one of the best managers in the sport, and now is he one of the worst managers in the sport? Well, you and I both know the answer.
Yeah, we know that answer. Yeah.
No. I mean, of course he's not. He's one of the better managers in the sport, but you look at the circumstances and things that happen. That's kind of what is going on in a lot of places. And so fans are, in a lot of ways, very confused, because it's like you said, here you have somebody who's incredibly talented. He did a fantastic job. I remember run differential last year. Everybody wants to talk about, last year was a little bit fluky for the Marlins because, they won a bunch of one-run ball games. I said, you know what that is? That's a direct reflection of their manager. Their manager knows what he's doing. Intense ball games, one-run games. We know how to get this thing done. And so he found a way to win. On the flip side of that, is he fully responsible for what's happened on the field this year?
No. And but we're going to have to end it on that because we got to get out of here within 90 seconds. So, but those are the points. And again, it ties into they didn't risk anything this year and they're getting no reward. And, we see the, Kansas City Chiefs, obviously in a different situation, big risk, big reward. And I wouldn't be shocked if they do win 3 in a row, but if they do, we'll talk about that in due time. Holly, great episode, and great catching up. And
Always.
And to our audience, please like, subscribe, comment. We're growing this thing. Enjoy football season. Baseball starting up for you. use your process right, and get everything going. With that, we got to get out of here, and we will catch everybody in the next video. Thank you.